Hi, welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick, and as always, my co-host Chris Lucian. And today, this is going to be a really fun show. We have Sandra Spaeth with us, and this is a real joy for me because I've had the pleasure of mobbing with Sandra several times, and really looking forward to talking about today's topic, which is mob programming in person versus remote. Is one better than the other? Pros, cons, all of the above. So we'll be looking forward to hearing from Sandra's experiences with that. But before we dive into the topic, Sandra, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Austin. Thanks. Thanks for having me on the show today. So I've been a full-time mob programmer for about 3 years now. I love it. I love the environment. I found that since we've gone remote and done the full-time remote mob programming, I found it even more effective and beneficial than when we were on-prem.
Nice. And maybe what's your before we dive into the remote versus not, what's kind of your role in the mob or in the department a little bit? You have a unique perspective, I think.
I do have a unique perspective. So I'm one of the few specialists in the mob, and I have a lot of experience with databases. So I've always seen things through that lens: database, data quality, and really how data drives our apps and our user experience forward.
Cool. Yeah. So maybe what might get us into the specifics of in-person versus remote. Maybe tell us a little bit about your journey from full-time to remote. Well, how was that? Was it rocky? Was it fairly smooth?
I've always sort of liked the idea of being remote, so I had that in going forward. My favor before we even started. When we first went remote, though, it was a little bit rougher than I had envisioned. So there's the initial setup of getting your equipment set up, your office space, your monitor, your computer. And I think that when we first did it, I didn't spend enough time setting up my environment. So I had some ergonomics things to consider, and got my workstation going, all set up nice. So that's really been beneficial. One thing, so it's been able to let me help control the noise around the environment so much better. So there's some difference in working remote versus working on-prem, of course. We don't get to interface with each other as much as we were able to when we were in the office. Even the way we collaborate and share information has changed. So that's definitely been some unique challenges that we've had to face as a team. But I've really found that we can do everything that we were able to do in the office, on-prem. We can still do those same things virtually. And just this week, we did that with a going away party for a coworker that turned out pretty fun. But there was definitely some implementation glitches for moving remote. It wasn't just a seamless transition.
What are some examples of that?
So, when I first set up, then the ergonomics wasn't perfect because I didn't spend enough time on it. Another challenge has been other family members. When we first went, it was just me in the house all day long. Yeah. And it was really, it was very easy. And now that I have other people that are quarantined with me person, then there's a little bit of sharing of the space. And
yeah, anybody that has been that has gone remote recently, that has a very active family, or maybe somebody that is they become the center of the attention because now they're home all day versus not being away at work all day.
Right.
Yeah, so I think there's some level that mobbers have to have of empathy that mobbers have to have with each other for essentially the impact of working at home unexpectedly, right? And remoting at home. So you might have people running around in the background and stuff.
Yeah. Everybody's got their own challenges. So people have the kids from home from school. My son's grown, but it's still got
things. Yeah. What's funny is my remote office has turned out to be really great setup. I almost joke around sometimes. I like moved into a corner executive office. Like I have window. I can see the ocean on good days. There's like park and greenery, and it's like I feel like very powerful, like I'm some sort of CEO or something. But one funny thing is that the desk that I just happened to set up on over to the right is all the books that our kids use for school. And so that's one thing I've noticed is like the stuff they need throughout the day is often here, you know what I mean? And so there's like, sometimes there's traffic and, but from what I've noticed is people usually enjoy it to see like a kid walking by and grabbing a book or something like that. So, or sometimes they'll try to sneak by, but they don't go unnoticed, you know?
Yeah.
So,
It's funnier to see them sneaking than to walk up.
Yeah.
It's fun too when you get to see it from the other side of when you get to see somebody's kids, and see it. It's fun.
Well, so I mean, this is the whole thing. Like, traditional like on-site work environments are typically, very sterile from like a, interpersonal interaction sort of standpoint, and so, it gives being remote while you're away from people and you're, less interacting kind of one-on-one. The interesting thing is that, having, kids kind of like photobombing the background, it gives a level of humanity to it that I think just doesn't exist in a regular workplace. And so there's probably something to be said for the fact that you're in your house and your life kind of spills a little bit into your work. You don't want it to overly spill into it, but yeah, it's a nice thing. It's very humanizing. Right?
Yeah. And as far as struggles to start off with, I think I'll share a little about mine. I originally had connections issues. So I had I will not say the type of laptop, but Chris and Sandra both know to not get us in trouble with any vendors. But I had that on a Wi-Fi connection, and it was just crash city for me for a while, trying to run every, the video conferencing, the AnyDesk, the ability to see the code and all that kind of stuff. So it was also like processing power, but also internet connection. So the Wi-Fi, I have like an old router. And so I think it's maybe 15 years old. And so I think one mobber was like, oh, you can't do that. You have to be on wired, or you should at least try. And as soon as I did that, things got way better. As soon as I switched to 2 different devices, things got better. Did you have any setup issues like that, Sandra, getting going for remote mobbing?
I'm really glad that you mentioned that. So when we first went remote, it was around the same time. The first week I think was really good, but then after that, everybody, it started to be a trend, and my cable provider started to experience latency. And so I had a whole week of frustration around connectivity. I did end up buying a new router also.
Yeah.
That was a really good investment. But those were, and that still does happen once in a while. But I haven't had it happen lately, so that's been good. But every once in a while, we still do have that. We still do have the glitches where we have to reconnect throughout the day. So I think that's just part of working remote. But
yeah, a lot of the service providers now, before I only knew when my internet was out, right? But now it's like you can tell that the service provider is like doing rolling maintenance between areas of the city, right? Because like one day one person will be kind of like down for a little while, and then it'll be like the next day the next person, the next day the next person, and it's almost like you can see like a little rolling blackout of connectivity happening because so that's been a weird phenomenon to watch that happen. Is these people that you live near but are not in the same service area, they typically end up being serviced one right after another. And so I think I've noticed a series of people being like, oh, my internet's out, and oh, it's back on again, and then another person will be like, oh, my internet's out right after. So that's been interesting. I think from my perspective, so I do a lot of online gaming, and so I've always tried to optimize my connection as much as possible. So I think people that play video games online probably were uniquely predisposed to live on video chat easily for a while. And so that ends up being like a stark difference, I think, between people that spend a lot of time online versus are mostly online when they're in the office. And so there's speaking of empathy, there's probably there needs to be empathy for the differences in, like lifestyles before and lifestyles after. And one of them is, internet connectivity and how important that is in your personal life, right?
Yeah, and I think that highlights a couple things for me. One is that's one thing that I felt like mobbing handles really well. When it was in person, it was like someone would, go have to use, the facilities or go to this meeting or that. And so people would come in and out, or they go on a break. And so, but the mob would continue. The code would keep moving, right? And I feel like it's the same thing when you have internet issues. It's like, oh, Alex is frozen. He'll probably be back in 5 minutes. You know what I mean? And then you just keep going, and then he comes back, and then he just jumps back into the flow of the mob. And the other thing too is I think all what I'm hearing from all this is it takes time. It's to get all the things aligned, right? So to get your internet set up, to get your office space set up, your ergonomics set up, to get used to video chat, right? I know a lot of people who only video chat on occasion, and they find it very uncomfortable, right? But I think a week of full-time mob programming, that'll get you very comfortable on video chat, because you do it all day, or at least more comfortable than you were before.
Right. To Chris's point about empathy, so I've noticed that on remote, there's a big difference in people's level of comfort with the video tools around Zoom or Teams, or if you're used to that, if you've used those tools before, then you're a little bit more comfortable. I think that we have to have a real need for empathy around people that just aren't used to any of that stuff at all.
Yeah. It's amazing because there's a lot of people that do software development, and some of them are just futurists and constantly involved in tech, and some of them, they go home at the end of the day and then they don't touch a computer until the next day. And I've noticed this throughout my career, but I think the difference is more pronounced during a remote transition.
Yeah. And I think the empathy goes to say that I've seen people feel guilty for their internet issues or things going down, is just to kind of make the safe spaces, be like, hey, don't worry about it. It's not a problem. We'll work through it. And you can give suggestions for things to help, but kind of ease the burden that they feel like that all the tech needs to work perfectly. Because it doesn't, because the mob can keep moving if it doesn't. So.
Yeah, that's really important, because it is going to happen everybody's going to have those issues that are completely out of our control, and the work will continue on. So no problem there.
Yeah. So maybe jumping to the benefits, Sandra. So what from what I got from talking to you before, is that you seem to like remote mobbing more than in person. What are some of the key things that seem to make it better for you than in person?
I do think that it's more effective. So I feel like it's more effective because we're able to control our own environments. Mobbing has really strong collaboration, really forces you to collaborate, and is really good at developing those collaboration skills. But we don't have to, sometimes have to give up our own, we give up the cube, right? We don't have the ability to control our light, the noise, the environment around us. So those things can be really distracting. And also, one size never fits all. So we're never going to have the perfect temperature, the perfect lighting, the perfect distance from the monitor to the eyes. It's you just can't have it perfect for everybody in a group. That just doesn't, unfortunately. So you can have all those things be as you need them to really focus and give your best out and give your best effort at work. So I think that's been really powerful. The social aspect of mobbing has also really helped me through this isolation period. So there's never lonely.
Yeah.
Talk to my friends all day long, building great software. So that's really fun. But I think really being able to control your own environment is really big key.
Oh, that's cool. And that's not something I think about very often, but and Chris, Chris and Sandra, you probably know this more than me, because you've been doing the full-time thing, mobbing more than me. But I remember the it just always comes up. I feel like every kind of global retrospective we had was the heater AC battle. You know what I mean? It was like, there was like the control. Yeah, there was like the control. And I think it was by my mob before we went remote. And it was just like the people would come fight. Like someone would come turn it up, someone would come turn it down, you know, or the sound, there'd be these sound barriers being taken everywhere. And some people would add them and some people would take them away. And it's just.
There's also a lot of little things, like when you have a bunch of people working together in a small space and you put a little stress there's just a lot of little stuff is just disappeared. A lot of things a lot of little challenges that we seem to have in the office just doesn't seem to be there. And have you found anything like that? Any
Yeah, so I think the first time anybody, you know, when I started mobbing, the first time somebody left the team was around the position of the screens. Like they basically were saying, hey, I can't deal with the screens being there, and so I've found a new job. And so you know, it was kind of shocking because it was like, where did we go wrong to the point where we didn't like ask the question if everybody was comfortable? And so you know, I think that's been a big piece of it, and it's really hard in person. You know, if you look at just the pictures on my blog and stuff like that, you'll see, you know, the environment has been, we've tried really hard to make the environment great for everyone. But yeah, I think, you know, to Sandra's point, the fact that you can control everything around you and still participate in a group has been a completely different situation. All of the problems that we were trying to solve just aren't problems in this environment. There are obviously other problems, and you know, and those things need to be worked around with different tools and things like that. But you know, in some situations, it's really important. But yeah, you know, you have enough room for personal belongings in the area, where in a mobbing environment that's purely mobbing and no cubes, you have none of that space. And so there's something to be said for a level of comfort and its effect on people's productivity. So I totally agree. I think that, you know, again, we spent lots of time, effort, thought in solving these problems. And it's just funny that, you know, as soon as you're in your own room and over an internet connection, and that doesn't mean that you couldn't be in an office in cubes and have the same result, but I think it took this event to really pull away from that idea of like, we must be all co-located, mobbing together in person and things like that. So it's been an interesting development, and you know, I think I've talked. I have a conference talk from before, and about basically experiments. This is the one I gave in Japan. The experiments that are unexpected will, you know, basically lead you to exit a state of complacency, right? And being complacent with things that you could be experimenting on is a bad place to be. So this is just one of those examples of an unexpected experiment kind of hitting you in the face, right?
I found, my food choices, I've always had a little bit of a challenge, like making my lunch before I go to work, because I'm not hungry in the morning, and I don't know, I'm not a morning person, so I was hitting the candy machine a little too much. So I feel like I'm eating healthier now, nice, and it's less expensive. So that's a nice.
Yeah.
So.
And I had maybe a follow-up question for you, Chris, on the facilities. So typically when people start mobbing it, there's kind of a high bar for entry for facility setup, right? Like ideally you have these big screen monitors, everything on wheels, and I haven't really thought about it, but since we've been remote, is it just less to manage money-wise, facility-wise, etc.?
Getting budget for anything as a leader is usually a pretty involved task, right? Because you basically have to prove out, like, hey, if we add sound barriers, it's going to save us money, right? And then you have to connect the dots all the way in between to actually make that argument, and then now you're like, hey, you have money to do that, right? And so a lot of people that are going through budgeting processes, you know, and trying to say, hey, we should take all these people that work individually and then make them work on one thing, and you're stuck, you know, basically the explanation cost of it all is you have to explain why 4 people working on one thing is better or more efficient than 4 people working on 4 things, right? You have to explain why you're needing to readjust the office in such a way where you have 2, 80-inch monitors on wheels with tables that are also on wheels with chairs, and then yeah, now we're gonna put them all together and then set up the building in such a way that that's comfortable, right? And ergonomic and safe and whatever. And so you'll see, I think, what I've noticed is that there's many more online mob programming opportunities now, and people just practicing mob programming. One, to just get some social interaction, like Sandra was saying. But like beyond that, it's just the bar to entry seems so much lower now because the remote video work is the kind of the standard today. And so, basically 6 months into everybody having to be remote for a while, you have this, you now have like basically, you might have had maybe more zealous people saying like remote is just not efficient and things like that. But now they're saying, okay, well, given the current situation, remote is the only way to do the work. Now saying, hey, we're going to mob, it's basically, we're going to get on a video meeting for a while and work on this stuff. It's not going to cost anything extra. You're not going to set up anything. We're taking, and so now you're only arguing for the developer's time. You're not arguing for developer time and initial budget and stuff. And so I heard, before everybody's being forced to go remote, I heard a lot of, oh, well, we there was this TV that this one team bought, and then we just asked them for it because we saw that it was on the floor, and then we did this thing, and so there was a lot of this like, scrappy sort of work where you basically had to like go and find these tools and bring them, into your physical space in order to get working. And then it's like, and then we proved that it was really great for us, and so then they bought us bigger TVs, right? And so that story that narrative just doesn't need to happen in this scenario, right? And so that's been really important for, I think, mobbing as a practice spreading out. So.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, so I guess maybe one question for both of you, I've heard it recently actually, is, I guess it was basically something along the lines of, how is it, I've actually heard a couple people say this, especially right after COVID hit, was how can it possibly be as high bandwidth communication as being in person, right? Like, when I'm in the room with somebody, when I'm in the room with the team, you can feel the energy, you can see the body language, you can do all those things. It's not, if there's no way it's possible that remote is as good or something like that. I mean, what are your guys' reactions to that kind of critique, so to speak?
So when we first went remote, I was really interested in trying to see all the different ways that we could collaborate online, because collaboration is so important to what we do. And we do retros, we do whiteboard drawings, we have our Kanban boards, we have all these ways that we visually communicate. And there's a little bit of a learning curve there, but I found that pretty much everything we can do remotely, that we can do there, but a couple extra steps maybe. Tools. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah. I think I've seen a lot of tools that have made things a little bit easier. I think that one thing that was really cool was things like idea boards or Azure DevOps retrospectives plugin. Those tools, it took a lot of like the writing time out of it. People would just, type in an answer, it would go up. People could kind of browse through it. No one was trying to read each other's handwriting, things like that. So there was a lot of this. We decided, communicating human to human is so hard. We decided to write them on sticky notes, and then reading them on sticky notes is so hard that like moving them to a digital platform actually ended up, I think, loosening some of those constraints. And so there's been some of that. There's also, I think that obviously the emotional, the transfer of like emotion is a lot harder over remote. And video is kind of like the highest fidelity that we can get in that, but we can't really see body language or anything along those lines. And so I think that some aspects are improved and some aspects are taken away from. But in the end, if people are more comfortable, I think one thing is just like commuting and stuff. So there's so much to it that people are less tired, and it's hard to argue that having an hour taken out of your day for a commute, right? So, because I've worked with developers and they would drive an hour back and forth, an hour to the place, an hour away from the place, right? So just if you use that, and so maybe you say, out of a 30-person team, you have 5 of those people that are commuting an hour. You have, 5 people on that team that are literally spending 2 hours out of their day that is on something other than what they want to be doing, right? It doesn't really provide them any value except getting to work. So it's just the sheer amount of gain that you get from having somebody be 2 hours worth more engaged, right? Of like, they're not at work for the 2 hours, right? But they're actually like getting more sleep, and they're spending time on something they want to do, and their mind has now gotten into a place where they're not worried about how much time they're spending on commuting anymore. The sheer gains that you get out of that, especially kind of in the environment where we're in, where it's like lots of traffic, you end up, I think that some people that were nearby and super productive actually lose less than what they gain, than the people who had long commutes gain. So I think a lot of it is actually based in the commute, to be honest. And so, there's a lot of like pluses and minuses in other areas, but it's really hard to say, the benefits you get from being in person are more valuable than the benefits that you get from all of your team members not having a commute.
Well, that's a really good point, and it reminds me of one of the things that I really love most when we first went remote, and we've been doing it for a while now, so I forgot. But but I was always rushing everywhere, rushing to get to work in time, and I have a dog, so I would rush home at lunch to walk my dog, and then I would have to rush back to work and hope I wasn't, so I was rushing all day long, and I'm just not rushed anymore. So it's huge for me.
Yeah. Nice. And think about all those cars that are not on the road right now because of it. And then people who are essential workers and need to be out on the road, like they have less traffic, right? Like, yeah, it's from a lean perspective, there's very, it's hard to argue against it when you take everything into account and just take all of the secondary and tertiary benefits and factor them into the primary, like I see bodies in the office, right?
Yeah. And one thing to that original objection that I've thought through more and experimented with more is kind of the energy or the body language, right? And so, well, if you break it down, I mean, so not everyone is comfortable having video on when they mob, and that's fine. And so probably empathy wins over that. But if you can model the behavior and get people to do it or inspire people to do it. So the way my mob has been operating since the beginning has always been video on. And I felt zero loss of energy, just from my personal experience. Like, while you're not seeing my hands and my feet and the rest of my body, really the face is really where you see, the main body language you need to see, right? Like if someone's frustrated or confused, they start doing this to their face. So they start like, looking around, you know what I mean? And so I don't felt like I lost anything there. And we joked around the same way we would before. There's even remote jokes that were new that you couldn't do in person, but, and so, for me, I haven't felt it, but, yeah, so I think the loss has been zero for me as far as body language and that kind of thing. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing, so you got to be careful with that too, because one thing that I was warned about, right? Because I forget who I was having this conversation with, but they were saying like, these are all your existing teams, right? So what's the difference when you start hiring somebody new? And so, we're going to be experimenting with that. But that's something that we just have, we hadn't had any turnover until now. And so now I think, in a number of weeks, we're going to bring on people and they will have to be introduced to the team remote. And so I'm one area that's in my mind that's really heavy right now for me is just the onboarding and offboarding process for somebody that's been remote, and what does that look like for a mob? And then, now you have this person that is among this group of people that have known each other in person, and you're the only one that's onboarded without that, right? And so I think being really conscious of that's super important as well. So yeah. And so that'll be a very interesting set of dominoes, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I guess I can speak to it a little bit. It wasn't a full onboarding or a thing, but we have had visitors since we've been remote, right? So
yeah.
Harold, which we've had on the show, he was a full week with us. So I guess that's probably the closest to onboarding, right? And then a few people who've joined us for a day.
And that was very comfortable then, right? Is that what you're getting at, or?
Yeah, from what I've seen, I mean, at least what they told us was very positive things, but it was all very it was very welcoming. It wasn't hard to jump in. It was basically the same things people said when they would visit us in person.
Yeah.
But there probably is a different dynamic when it's like, this is the team I'm joining for my employment versus visiting, right? But
and I think Sandra, you often visit other teams and things like that too, and so. Yeah, so I might be wrong about it, and again, I got this from a conversation, but it's definitely, I think one thing, it'll be different to have, because we made this transition, and then we've kind of been in like this little stasis bubble again, right? Of like we've been getting used to it, and so it's evolving, right? And it'll be really interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, I did have to make an effort, a concerted effort when we first went and we were to go and visit the other teams, because it is a little, you don't want to interrupt, you don't really know, but it's been very well received, and worked out really well once you get past.
So what is that like for you? Do you, so you have opportunities to kind of go and visit other teams, and in that specialist role, I'm sure that you get invited a lot. What do you do to kind of create the cross-team integration? Because I see you do that often. Is you're always finding a way to build bridges between teams and things like that. So why do you do that? What is it to you? Like, what's the, how do you accomplish it?
Well, I accomplish it by just creating low stakes interactions with the team members, so that we're really comfortable when the stakes are higher and they're having more database issues or more difficult challenges to work on. I also just love databases, and I think that they're such a key part of the services we provide. So really honored to be able to help people with those challenges when they get to them. So I think it's about asking questions and having empathy, and really understanding the prime directive that we all make the best decisions as we could at the time, because usually when they call me in, it's because something's not working well.
Yeah. Everybody made the best decision that they could have with the information that they had, like the retrospective prime directive.
Right. And so then this is where we are, and then how do we go forward? It's never about, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit on the technical side, but just, keeping it about moving forward and
so avoiding the interpersonal conflict and solving the problem and working in a way that will yield a positive result, and that's really important. But I like what you said about low stakes interactions, is just creating opportunities for that, and then I also noticed that you're really passionate about retrospectives and things along those lines, and so I've seen you offer to host retrospectives for teams and things like that. So I think all of that creates this acceptance of hey, you're on another team, but we really need your help. And so I see people avoiding asking for help for some people, and I see people opting into asking people for help to other people. And I don't think there's really very much of a difference, except for I think the number of those low stakes interactions with those people. And it's harder to go and ask somebody for help when you haven't talked to them in 6 months or something, right?
Yeah, and actually it was funny. This is back when we were in-person mobbing, but I think it was when we were doing a human systems thinking training or whatever. But it was funny because it was two different mobs, and we traced how we influenced each other in the past and didn't really notice. And it was the low stakes interactions that really made the big differences. So it was like, oh, where did you get that idea to do that technical thing? Oh, well, I was in a carpool with so and so, and then we were just talking about how the day went, and then he's like, oh, well, you can do this instead of that, and then I was on a run with this person, and they mentioned that, you know what I mean? And so I think maybe with remote you have to be more intentional about those kind of things, right? So more opportunities to cross pollinate. I think some things that come to mind are like the lean coffees that we'll do between.
Yeah.
Those are a little more formal, but I think like what you hosted the other day, Sandra, like the going away party for someone, or group learnings, cross teams, or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really trying to keep up. I used to like go to lunch with people just to keep those low stakes interactions and communications flowing. And so when we first went remote, that was a big loss for me because I didn't get to go to lunch with my friends. So I started doing that virtually.
Nice.
Very nice.
Yeah, I think that's really important, is keeping those things going. The cross team lean coffees originally were kind of just, it was like, it was interesting because we were in person and we were still doing lean coffees, and just getting people from other teams to talk to each other in that formal lean coffee format. And then when it went remote, like the value increased of those meetings increased dramatically. Just have a lean coffee with people you haven't talked to in a while, and you haven't seen people, outside your house very long. And so I think that the engagement in those meetings have gone up since we've gone remote, and the value that came out of them have gone up as well.
I have one follow-up question. I know we're getting close to time, but I really want to ask this one. So I have been on the same mob for a long time, like 6, 9 months or something like that. And it's a relatively smaller mob. It's not like a multi-mob. And so my experience of jumping around between mobs has been fairly low, but I know both of you do that, right? So Sandra with their database specialist, and then Chris, it's kind of your job to Zoom bomb other mobs and, come mob with people here and there. Are there things that, I guess I have a two-sided question. One, things that you do when you join a mob to kind of make that transition easy if you're kind of intermittently joining another mob or another pair? And are there things you've seen people do that make it easier for you to enter and join another mob remotely?
That is a challenge, when you're changing teams, because I've been on every mob except for the mob you're in right now, Austin. So it does help to have a little bit of understanding of the product and the framework, and so you not going in blind. So that can be really helpful. I like to understand the architecture of the whole product as well as the database schema. Just have some little bit of time to review those things kind of do help me, but I usually just after that ask questions of the team and see what the actual need is and go from there.
Yeah.
We have only so we have 4 teams where we are right now. So for the most part, I'm able to have not an in-depth understanding of teams outside of my own, but at least some understanding of where they are with their product and their databases, so that I can go and help a little bit.
Fantastic. I think, so usually I'm asked to join another team, or I'll go and join another team when I have time and I'm not doing other meeting type stuff. And a lot of the time it's just, kind of putting the, I guess, manager hat away, just saying like, hey, I'm going to mob on the team as a developer, and so I'm going to compartmentalize this, and I'm, that's over here now. And that's not always, super successful from how that's received, but, I just try and do my best around that because I want to be a resource to people as well. And so, and I love to mob, like I'd rather be mobbing all day sort of thing. So you know, a big piece of it is just getting into the technology right away and running with it. And you know, I am very much an improviser, and so when I get into a mob and I haven't seen the technology or the infrastructure or anything along those lines, what I like to do is just let people mob on it and have people navigate me for a while until I have an idea and I can start contributing. And then, so, you know, it's kind of like a learn as you go sort of thing. So I usually always prefer it that people don't give me an explanation when I come in. I just like listen to what the conversation, because sometimes the problem a team might be having that might ask me for help or something along those lines might be an interpersonal problem, not a code problem. And so it's nice to learn the technology as I'm learning the social and interpersonal interactions at the same time, to kind of say, hey, why don't we change this a little bit, you know, or something. But yeah, and again, I approach it from, you know, I try and be a peer with everyone in that space, and I don't really, you know, mentally check off like, oh, this person has a bad habit, right? That just doesn't, you know, and in that I have to be kind of relentless about giving feedback, right? Because, you know, I don't want to see something and not say what it was that I saw, but I don't, you know, I also don't want people to be afraid that like I'm going to punish them for something that they were just behaving the way that they behave otherwise, right, without me there. So it's definitely an exercise in compartmentalization.
Yeah, that's one thing I've seen you do, Chris, is I guess there's, in my mind, there's like two modes of someone entering a mob for a short-term basis. There's one that's kind of like, I'm kind of drifting in and drifting out. And I think that's kind of the one, Chris, you're typically in, where it's kind of like, I think the first thing you said once when you joined our mob is, don't bring me up to speed, keep going as you guys were, and I'll acclimate in. And I've heard others do that as well. And I think that kind of makes it clear what kind of entrance you're doing into the mob, because sometimes you do want to bring someone up to speed, right? You have a visitor or someone who literally is just joining the team. You don't want to be like, all right, welcome to the team. Okay, what do you want to do on line 5? You know what I mean? Like give them no context at all. You know, you want to be like, hey, here's our domain. Here's the little diagram, what's going on. We're going to be working in this file, and away we go. We can start mobbing kind of thing, right? And so I think when you enter, to say, be explicit with like, hey, bring me up to speed, or as you were, you know what I mean? I think it can help the mob do it well. And one thing I've seen Sandra do a lot is back 2 mobs ago, we asked Sandra for help a lot. Was you had a good mix of asking enough questions to understand what was going on, and then you'd get your hands dirty, and you would be like, within 5-10 minutes, we'd be at the root of the problem, and it'd be like, wow, that was incredible bringing Sandra, and we need to do that more, you know. So, but you also didn't like over navigate, right? You asked some questions, you know, helped us kind of find it, but then you would like point us in the right direction. And so, so I think remotely it's the same thing. So cool. Well, I think we're hitting our time box. So before we close, Sandra, was there anything you'd like to share or add before we close the show?
No, thanks for having me. That was really good talk. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, Chris, can you close us, sir?
Yeah, sure. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here with us on our episode. And if you think that this episode would be helpful to anyone out there that might be struggling with some of the same problems we're talking about, or thinking about mobbing for the first time, this might be a good episode to share. And like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.